Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The December meeting of the Highland Park Board of Adjustment is hereby called to order. Annual notice of this meeting was provided to the Star Ledger on January 27th, 2022, and to the Home News Tribune on January 27th, also 2022. In addition, notice of this in-person meeting was emailed to the Home News Tribune, the Star Ledger, and the Highland Park Planet on November 23rd, 2022, and was posted on the Borough website at www.hpborough.com and on the bulletin board at Borough Hall, 221 South Fifth Avenue, Highland Park, New Jersey, on November 23rd, 2022, and has remained continuously posted as required by law. Fire exits are to the left and the right of the chambers. And I'm going to remind everybody that we record, and when you're speaking, please speak into the microphone. So I'm going to get out the agenda. Open the door. Here we go. Thank you. I'm happy to have this one. Okay. Tanya, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Richmond,
Here.
Mr. Fector,
Present.
Mr. Pheasant,
Here.
Mr. Hofer,
Here.
Mr. Holstuffer, Ms. Corbman,
Here.
Mr. Rosner,
Here.
Mr. Rothberg, Mr. Winfrey,
Here.
Thanks, Tanya. The first item of business on the agenda this evening are any public comments that are not related to the application that's going to be heard tonight. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on matters not related to the application? Okay, seeing that, we're going to move into the hearing of a new case. What I don't see is a microphone set up for the public. Do you know anything? You have two microphones.
We only got 2 microphones. So one that they're going to have, Mr. Kaufman and Chris Cox.
Okay, so there are now 2 microphones in this room. One is here at the table where the applicant and the applicant's counsel will be. The other applicant is, the other microphone is sitting at the table with the board's planner. So when members of the public are invited to speak and would like to speak, I would ask if you would be able to please go over to one or the other of the microphones, either one is fine, and just speak into that. Okay, next item on the agenda is the Ferret Foundation, 141 Riverview Avenue, known as Block 2505, Lot 13, item number Z2021-02. The application is listed as for D1 and C variances. I'm understanding that the D variance request has been deleted. Mr. Kaufman. Good evening. They have
Apparently we do, unfortunately. Yep.
Please feel free to sit if you would like.
The applicant.
Excuse me, please.
Philip Kaufman, hearing on behalf of the applicant.
Welcome, Mr. Kaufman. Sure.
I think he just walked into the, is that him there?
Hopefully the board has received the packet that we sent in.
All 70 pages of it.
Well, it's thorough, hopefully, and makes points. One of the major problems we've had here is, well, first of all, if you're not familiar, this is about my client has chickens with various issues at his house. Originally, it was a violation. There were questions about whether this was a proper use, not even a proper use. It was allowed, and it was determined finally that as a getting old.
There was an issuance. There was an issuance that by the zoning officer indicating that the activity is a permitted home occupation. So that's why the D variance was no longer a component of this application. It is my understanding that it is still a C variance because of the fact that these chicken coops that are part of the chicken raising process that your client is involved in are in violation of certain setbacks. Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, not only that, well, it's a question about, the main question is a question about whether or not these are structures at all.
Let me get into that. Unless you have, would you like to address that and then I'll respond, or would you like me to tell you my opinion? Why don't you indicate?
Fill everybody in at the same time. Yeah. All of the items which are considered by the zoning officer as buildings or appurtenances to the property, all of them are on wheels. They're carts. And under the law, a cart is not a structure, which is what the statute says. There's two coops and a box with a solar panel on it. It's completely sustainable. It's not a structure. There's a dispute about that. I'm sure Mr. Thomas can give his opinion now about that. But that's really one of the main issues that's left on this.
All right, so let's have Mr. Thomas opine as to whether or not the items are structures. Roger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me just indicate that respectfully I have to disagree that the law does not indicate what you have suggested. I refer you to section 40:55D-7. Underneath that is, of course, the definitional section. It defines structure. I have to take those glasses off because this print's so small. Structure means the combination of materials to form a construction for occupancy, use, or ornamentation, whether installed on, above, or below the surface of a parcel of land. So that's what the definition is, and I understand that the ordinance may be somewhat different, but it is the statute that defines what it is that a structure is. Now, you will note, unfortunately, that the word install does not define in either the municipal land use law or in the ordinance. So what do you then do, pursuant to appropriate interpretation, pursuant to my late partner's book, Mr. Cox, is to look at other alternatives. And the other alternatives are of course, definitions contained in dictionaries, which is what I've done. I have looked at both the Oxford Dictionary as well as the Webster's Dictionary. And what it says in the Oxford Dictionary is that when you install, you either place or fix an item on the ground. The fact that these are placed on the ground makes them a structure pursuant to the Oxford Dictionary definition. With regard to the Merriam-Webster's definition, it indicates to be set up for use or service. Setting up does not require it to be fixed to the ground. It just simply says it's set up, which is similar to the definition as it contains in the Oxford Dictionary, which is to place on the ground. So again, it does not require a fixing on the ground. And then, of course, there is the opportunity to go to what I think is a valid source, which is the definition or the Dictionary of Definitions as published by I believe I'm right, it's the late Harvey Moskowitz, and in that particular section, he indicates the definition, which he uses as the, in fact, statutory definition. But his commentary is very clearly that all buildings are structures, not all structures are buildings. So that's in fact further evidence, in my opinion, that a structure does not have to be fixed to the ground, such as a building or a tower or some other type of combination of materials, but rather it simply has to be either fixed or placed on the ground, and that's what the situation is here. We have the series of these structures, and as I sort of using the definition of these materials that are placed on the ground, movable though they may be, they are still structures, and therefore it's my opinion, Madam Chair, members of the board, that this is a structure, and therefore it is subject to a variance under section 70C.
So thank you, Mr. Thomas. The board will accept Mr. Thomas's opinion as to the definition of structure and the fact that the items on the property are structures. Mr. Kaufman, would you like to move on?
Yes, we have on the statute here. That's the ordinance.
Respectfully, feel free to read the ordinance, but respectfully, the ordinance does not supersede the statute. The statute is the definition that is required for this board, because as you know, Mr. Kaufman, this is a statutory body, and it cannot go beyond what the statute says. And therefore, whatever the ordinance may say, frankly, luckily, I did not write that ordinance, so I don't take credit or abuse for that ordinance. The fact of the matter is the ordinance is not correct in light of the statute. But feel free to bring it up if you'd like.
In any event, is this working?
It is. Well, I
It
think
is
it is.
working.
Do you hear me? Is it?
You
can't-
don't?
Oh, maybe it's not. Maybe.
I had it
Mr.
right
Kaufman,
like this.
yeah, that's
Can you hear
better.
me?
No?
Mr. Kaufman, why don't you, or maybe your client can help you out. There's a button usually on the back. On the back. Look underneath.
Can you hear him?
Underneath.
I can talk really loud. Is something to be plugged into?
All right, so
Oh, it is.
Right?
the microphone is on, and you're
Hello?
being recorded.
There you go.
If you
I-
hold
All right.
it close to your chin,
All
I
right.
think everybody will be able to hear you. Can you hear when that's the case?
Everybody complains I'm too loud.
Not this
normally.
time.
Not this time. All right. In the event that that is the case, we would want a variance to continue because of restrictions on the property that were previously made. In 1997, this house was constructed from another parcel, and a variance was sought by the owners, Dr. Brighthart and his wife, Bart, and his wife. The variance was a bulk variance, the side yards too small, it's a corner property. There's not a lot of room on the property. The only area where the chickens can go to eat and be housed is within the coop itself is within the line of the house, in the structural line of the house. The solar panel sticks out about 2 feet beyond the lines. And the town has a policy, a firm policy, from what I've seen, about sustainability. And this is a sustainability issue. The chickens provide eggs. There are no roosters, no early morning crowing. People come to the house on their way to Johnson Park, and they bring their children to look at the chickens. It's an asset to the town. It helps the sustainability of the community. And it's worthwhile. some of my points here. Sorry. That matter, you know, Highland Park received a award, in fact, for its sustainability efforts. And that seems to be one of the town's major policies. It's the size of the coops, it's virtually impossible to get them into the backyard, or in what's supposedly the backyard or side yard. And if so, they would violate the 5-foot setback. The footprint of the house is, the panel overlaps the part with the panels on it, are, I think, 20 inches beyond the line. Principal building. I'm sorry. Beyond principal building line, and rather than use standard electricity, it's solar power. There's a policy of not only the town, but the country, going through the country now, about using sustainable energy. They cause no problems. Moving these structures, there's foliage in front of them, blocking most of it from the view from the street. It's corner property. One of the excuse me for a second.
Take your time.
I need it.
Oh, sorry.
Another matter this afternoon, so I couldn't fully prepare for tonight. The property is in a different region, in a it's in a forest area. It's the edge of Donaldson Park, right on the border of Donaldson Park. It's in a forested area. It's adjacent to several conservation districts. It fits in the area. The structure, the buildings, one call it a building or a structure, coops are screened from the street by, mostly screened from the street by bushes. The pen, which is used to prevent animals from the park, especially foxes, from coming up and eating having the chickens for dinner, is on wheels, and when it's necessary, it's wheeled out of the garage, get out there, spend their time eating, walking around, and then it can get put away again. The encroachments are minimal. We're talking about something that's on wheels that is sitting under the property line, under the under the eaves. It's one part of it, which is the energy part, comes out almost a little less than 2 feet beyond that area. Now, under the eaves, it's legal. It's within, structure would be permitted there. It's minimal type of infringement. It's not bothering anybody. The chickens themselves are something of great value to the community. As I said, people bring their kids to see the chickens. You don't have enough of that. Well, there are other people raising chickens around the town, at least about 4 or 5 that I know of. A variance for the ability to maintain those, disrupt the parts where they are. It's warrant. Something we should be able to get.
All right. What would you like to do? Mr. Kaufman, I have to ask you a question. I know that you're an attorney of law. Are you a licensed planner in the state of New Jersey as well?
Planner? No.
Okay. What would you like to do now, sir?
As you know, Mr. Kaufman, you certainly have a right, and you have done so quite eloquently, presented your case from a legal viewpoint. But the board is not in a position to rely upon lawyers who talk, as you know. We don't give testimony. We get sweared at, not get sworn in. So you need to have something of a record in order for the board to take action upon.
All right.
Sure. Sir, do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give will be the truth, so help you God?
I'm sorry, I didn't realize that you were addressing me.
I am addressing you. Shall we
Sir,
do it again?
Would you hold that up closer to your chin so you can be heard, please?
Okay, again, I didn't realize that the gentleman was addressing me or that I was going to be expected to say something. I don't understand these proceedings.
All
Well,
right,
that's
I
what-
understand that you're new here, and we welcome you. Would you begin by telling us your name and where you live? You can sit or stand, whatever is more comfortable.
Madam Chairman, I have a neurological defect which if I sit down for too many minutes, I'll probably fall asleep and fall over when I stand up. So I only sit down when I'm ordered to do so.
You can
No.
stand or sit as you choose.
Thank you.
Sir, do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you are about to give will be the truth, so help you God?
I do not.
Okay. Then maybe you want to take a minute.
I've had this before. Will you certify under penalties of perjury that what
Fine.
you're going to say is true?
I'm willing to do that, yes.
Okay. Would you be kind enough again, for the record, to state your name and spell your last name, please?
Yes, we haven't gotten that far yet.
But I've asked you that now. We've now
My
gotten
name-
that far.
My name is Jack Burr,
And your address?
and I am a tenant at 141 Riverview Avenue, Highland Park, New Jersey, zip code 08904. Please note that the address is not on 2nd Avenue.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Kaufman, why don't you conduct your examination? Well, actually, if it makes it more convenient, there's another mic over there, if you'd like to get that, Mr. Burr, and then hopefully you both can conveniently make it clear. There we go. Thank you, Mr. Costanza.
All right. How long have you lived in the property at 141 Riverview?
I didn't say I live there at all. I never say I live somewhere. I have been a resident there since approximately March of 2021.
I'm going to ask you a question to help the board understand some of the things that you're saying.
May I ask you a question first? Would you please explain to these nice people that because of my autism spectrum disorder, some of our conversation might be awkward at times? It's not intentional.
That was the question I was going to ask you.
We appreciate that, Mr. Byrne. We will take that into consideration.
Thank
Thank you very much.
All right. When did you move into the property at 141 Riverview?
I just answered that one. Ask another question.
Did a time come when you wanted to raise chickens?
Yes, that time came when I was about 30 years old. That was a long time ago, 1970. At that time, I had about 3,000 chickens, so the number of chickens that my wife and I are taking care of right now is tiny compared to what I used to take care of.
How many chickens do you have?
And I assume that means now.
Now.
Right now, we have a total of 31 chickens here and there, of which only 14 chickens are the subject of this meeting.
Okay. You have chickens in other locations?
Yes.
Of the chickens that you have at 141 River, when did you start raising chickens at that property?
Approximately May, give or take a month.
Of which year?
That's because we acquired different groups of chickens at in different weeks. So approximately May of 2021.
Okay.
May I answer the question you haven't asked yet?
What kind of equipment, what kind of housing do you have for the chickens?
We have industry standard housing. We have industry standard housing, which is not, I don't think housing is the right word to use. It's equipment. The equipment is designed according to the highest principles of standards for residential poultry raising. In other words, it's designed for people that raise chickens in a residential area, not a commercial enterprise. And these pieces of equipment are designed for home use, which is how we're using them. They're built according to the standards that are published and promulgated by the State of New Jersey, Rutgers University Department of Agriculture, and they comply with the principles outlined in the United States Department of Agriculture and the New Jersey State Department of Agriculture, which has requirements for the keeping of domestic poultry.
And do you follow those?
Yes, we are following all of those regulations and standards.
Now, when did you become aware that there was a problem with the chickens, the places where you keep the chickens, the coops?
That would be in May of 2021.
What
I
happened?
first became aware that there might be a problem when my next door neighbor approached me while I was putting up a chicken coop, which means rolling it into place. When I was rolling the chicken coop into place and the neighbor was watching, and he said, "You're going to have chickens here, aren't you?" And I said, "What makes you say that?" And he said, "Well, I see a chicken coop." And I said, "Well, you're right, it was designed to be a chicken coop, but how do you know I'm not just going to be keeping grass seed and fertilizer in there?" He said, "No, you're going to be keeping chickens. I can tell. I know you're going to keep chickens." And I said, well, does that please you or displease you? And he said, well, I'm not sure I want to have chickens around here. And I said, oh, you don't like chickens? And he said, sure, I like chickens. I like to eat them. I don't want them living next door to me.
Okay.
My neighbor's name is Stuart Feinblatt. And I said, well, Stuart, if you think you're not going to like the chickens, you let me know 3 weeks after I put chickens in there. And if you don't like it, I'll remove the chickens.
What happened?
3 weeks later, he came by and said, those chickens look really nice. And they seem so sweet. And their feathers sparkle in the sunlight. And I never realized that chickens could be such nice neighbors.
Mr. Kaufman, I'd like to caution you that your client is providing hearsay comments, and Mr. Feinblatt actually is here, and if we want to hear from Mr. Feinblatt, we'll have the opportunity to do that later. And I would also like to encourage you to remind you that this is your opportunity to put on a land use case.
That's what I'm trying to get.
So I would encourage you to move in that direction, please.
Before I was graciously interrupted by the chairman, I was going to add that the chickens that we are discussing right now and with Mr. Feinblatt are not the subject of this meeting at all.
We know that.
All right.
That was already, the attorney mentioned that.
Yes.
All right.
You need to ask me about the chickens along 2nd Avenue, please.
Where do you keep the carts for the chickens?
The chickens and the equipment that's the subject of this meeting are along 2nd Avenue.
Where in Second Avenue?
Well, it's at the corner of 2nd Avenue and Riverview Avenue. This is a corner property.
Talking
And the
about the chicken
equipment,
coops.
the equipment is under the eaves. The two of the three pieces of equipment are under the eaves or up against the house. They're not on the grass. The
Can-
third piece of equipment, that's the exercise pen on wheels, is presently in the garage. We would like to take it out of the garage and allow the chickens to have some exercise in a protected pen, if that's okay with this august assemblage.
Okay. Can you put it on any other part of the property, put these items on any other part of the property other than the Second Avenue side?
Yeah, I could put these pieces of equipment on the front yard instead of the side yard. If we cut down all the trees that make that impossible, I could put them on the other side yard that abuts another house with the address of 804 2nd Avenue if we demolish the bathroom to make enough room.
Is it practical?
I don't
be
think
able
it's
to put it-
practical to put it anywhere else. The reason why we don't have a lot of choices is because somebody peeled off our backyard over 10 years ago and gave it to somebody else. So we have too much house on too little land to be able to have a backyard and put our chickens in the backyard like other people can. If this board will give me back my backyard, I'll put the chicken coops there in a heartbeat.
Okay. Now, there was research done about the property, and were variances given for the construction of the house the way it is?
Madam Chairman has informed me that that's hearsay. I don't know about those things.
Please go ahead and answer your attorney's question. Do you know if there were variances granted?
Oh, okay. On advice of counsel, he infers that this board granted a variance for the backyard portion of our property to get peeled off and given to somebody else over 10 years ago but I haven't seen that variance, and my attorney has not seen the variance either. He's inferring it because, according to my attorney, the construction department granted a certificate of occupancy to Dr. and Mrs. Breitbart to dwell in the house after they peeled off the backyard. I don't know if I'm saying this correctly.
You're
but-
doing fine. Thank you very much. Mr. Kaufman, let's ask the next question.
Is it possible, and I'm asking this again, but I just want to clarify it for the board. Is it possible,
Yeah, he's right. Raise up the mic closer to you.
can't get it much closer, all right. And I'm asking this again, just to clarify, that is there any other place where you could put the pens in a practical way on the property?
There are no other choices of where to put the chicken coop that would not result in disease and death of the chickens and destruction of a portion of our house. We don't have those choices.
Are you-
The alternative is to not have a chicken coop at all.
And, are you asking this board to grant a variance because of the shape of the property?
Okay, because of the shape and size of the land and the shape and size of the house, and because the house is right up against the, what do you call those lines? Setback lines or something on all sides, we don't have another place that we could put the chicken coops. So we would need a teeny tiny variance to allow the one chicken coop to protrude 24 inches beyond the eaves of the building, and we need a larger size variance to allow us to have the wire exercise pen on the grass, that's what it's designed for. It's designed by the manufacturer to roll around on the grass. And the only place we have grass is on 2nd Avenue side of the property. We have no grass on the Riverview side of the property. We have no grass between our house and the neighbor's house at 804 2nd Avenue. And we have no grass between our house and the other neighbor's house at, I don't know that address. Oh, yes, I do. 137 Riverview Avenue. There's no grass there either. The only place that we have grass is along 2nd Avenue, and chickens that can't get access to grass are not going to be healthy chickens.
Okay.
Raising chickens without letting them run around on the grass and dig for worms and eat up grubs results in factory chickens. And by the way, the year that the chickens have been running around on that grass has caused that grass to proliferate and blossom in a way that the grass never has done before, without the use of any fertilizers or pesticides. Once again, it's a sustainable practice. It's an all-win.
Do you have any further
I don't
questions?
have any further questions.
All right. Would you prefer to sit or stand, Mr. Burr? Okay.
Why don't you keep, Mr. Burr, why don't you keep the microphone just for a minute or two?
I'm also happy to answer any questions posed by any board member.
The board members will have their opportunity to ask questions in a moment. Let's begin. Well, let me invite questions from the board first, and then we have some questions for Mr. Cosenza. Are there any questions that the board members have at this time? You'll have multiple opportunities tonight for questions. Any questions right now?
I actually do have a question. In viewing the property, I see that there is the chicken coop in the front corner, the one closest to Riverview, has a fairly lengthy runway to get into it, which clearly sticks out further than your testimony just now. So what is your plan with regard to that piece of the chicken coop there?
One man's runway is another man's elevated flower bed, and that's what it is, and that's all it has been since we put it there. And it's not affixed to the land, and my wife and I can pick it up and put it wherever we feel like, and that's where we feel like right now. And the reason it's there right now is to keep petunias and snapdragons out of reach of the deer that eat anything they can get their jaws around.
And with respect to the pen that they would exercise in, that's currently in your garage. It's not actually present on the property now. Is that correct?
That is correct, but to give a long answer to your short question, I believe it was the clerk of the board who asked us to take it out of the garage and put it on the lawn so that the members of the board would have a chance to see it in place. We haven't had a chance to do that yet.
And is the operation to keep it in one spot and then once in a while move it around, or would it go into the garage every night?
The objective would be to move it from one spot to another so we don't wear out one area of grass, and to keep the chickens able to get exercise and eat blades of grass and worms and grubs and so forth all over the lawn over the space of a month.
But it wouldn't move inside every night. It would stay in one spot for a little while and then move to another spot and stay
I
there
would
for a little while.
appreciate to not have to do that, because that eats into the time necessary to prepare dinner.
I'm just asking about what
Yes.
what your intention
It's
is.
time consuming to do that.
Got
We
it.
would like to just have it here one day and here the other day and here, migrate it across the lawn on a schedule. By the way, the piece of equipment is described by the manufacturer as a tractor pen. Tractor, as in tractor trailer, means a pen that you pull from one place to another. It's called a tractor pen. It's intended to be here on Monday, here on Tuesday, here on Wednesday, something like that. That's the normal way of using it. We can also put it in the garage every night. I don't see the benefit of anybody for doing that, but it could be done that way as well.
Okay, that's it for now. For me.
Mr. Burr, I'm looking at the review letter from Mr. Cosenza dated July 21, 2022, in which he requested that you provide us with a survey with boxes showing where the items are located. Do we have that here this evening, Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
All right, it would be helpful to see that.
Well, no, that's on,
I'm trying to find the page number where that's located.
Thank you. No, Mr. Cosenza already had what you submitted in your 70-page application. He was asking for something that would be clear and that would be marked clearly. Do you have anything other than what you submitted with the application, a
Good.
visual other than what you submitted with the application?
Good point, Madam Chairman. The original paper submission, all the information was there, but not jumping off the page. And Mr. Cosenza asked us to do something to make it jump off the page, to add color. And so the version of the application that this board has posted on its website has that colored version.
Right, and he asks you in July of 2022 if you, in lieu of highlighting, would draw in the boxes. Apparently, you don't have that. Let's just move on. Do you have any photos of the streetscape with you tonight?
I'm sorry, I missed the last few words.
I'm sorry. Do you have any photos of the streetscape with you tonight?
I apologize, what's a streetscape?
A photo looking at your home and showing the coops.
Oh. What we have instead of that, because we thought that's what the board wanted, was artists' renderings, drawings of what you're calling streetscape. And we have 3 of those drawings.
Of your home.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I think maybe what we need to do is now ask the planner to participate. Since we have only the board's planner, we're going to ask Mr. Cosenza's opinions on some things, and then what we'll do is we'll give the board another opportunity for questions, and then we'll open it to the public for the first opportunity for the public to ask questions. The public will have another opportunity later on to ask more questions. Mr. Cosenza, shall we go through the review letters, and then I have some very specific questions to ask you as well.
Can you hear me?
We hear you fine.
Okay, so I'm losing my voice a little bit, so I'll try my best to speak into the microphone.
Okay.
Madam Chair, do you mind if I start with some questions first for the applicant?
Please, that would be very helpful.
Okay. During testimony indicated that the property received some sort of variance or some sort of site application, land development application. Sounds like it might have been a subdivision. That resulted in the current condition of the property with respect to the survey that was submitted. It's 100 by 100, is that correct? The property is 100 feet by 100 feet.
Is this a question to me?
Yes, sir.
I'm not that conversant with surveys and so forth, but if I can answer your question sort of my way. Originally, there were 3 lots in an L shape. Or not an L shape. 3 lots that formed a large square, basically. 100 feet, I believe, along 2nd Avenue, and 100 feet along Riverview Avenue, consisting of 3 parcels. Parcel names have changed over the decades, but it was originally 13, 14, and 15, if I remember correctly. Am I remembering correctly?
I don't know.
All right.
That wasn't submitted
They were
as part of
marked
the application.
13, 14, and 15 on the plan of Riverview Terrace that was approved in the year, what is it, 1908 or 1914? And the board has that map. The map is included in our application. And if you look on that map, you'll see the 3 lots. The original house that was built on those 3 lots was smaller than the present house. What I'm calling the 3rd lot served as the backyard for that house. So I'm telling a story, like Gabby Hayes, telling a story that there were 3 lots, and there was a house built on 2 of them, and the 3rd lot was the backyard. And the backyard was a fruit orchard, and this was part of a agricultural type estate. In fact, this is part of what used to be the Donaldson Farm, which is how the Donaldson Park got its name. So the backyard was a fruit orchard, and the original house became dilapidated, and one of the previous owners decided to demolish the house, sell off the backyard to a highly placed state government officer, and build a new house, which was filling the remaining 2 lots up to the gills, right up to the setbacks all the way around, with no backyard anymore. And so somehow that squeaked by this board. The board said, okay, you can have a big house on a small lot with no backyard. Mr. Cosenza, I believe at one point you wrote a letter informing us that the house was in violation, and we made repeated requests for you to flesh that out and tell us what the violation was. Unless you tell us differently tonight, we're inferring that you were referring to exactly what I'm talking about, that the house, the present house does not meet the zoning requirements because it doesn't have the 70-foot backyard area.
Excuse me, Mr. Burr, I just want to refocus us. The question Mr. Cosenza asked you is, what are the dimensions of the lot? Chris, do you know that from the survey? Can you tell? It's a tiny, shrunk down document, so I don't know if you can tell.
Yes, there was a survey submitted in the December packet.
Yeah.
The property dimensions are 100 feet along South 2nd Avenue and 100 feet along Riverview Avenue. So the property has a lot area of 10,000 square feet.
Okay, and is that a conforming lot in Highland Park?
It is double the
It
conforming.
is, and let me ask you another question. Are corner lots atypical, unusual, unique in Highland Park or any other town?
It is very typical.
Right,
Anytime
there
you have
are
a-
two on every block.
Yeah, anytime you have a street network, a gridded pattern like Highland Park does, every single corner is a corner lot.
Okay, and we are working on an assumption, nobody here knows, that variances perhaps or probably were granted or not granted many years ago, and a residence was constructed on the 10,000 square foot lot.
Yes.
Is there any backyard space on that lot?
There is, and that was going to be the comment I was going to lead into following the question. The
Okay.
comment regarding the 10,000 square foot lot, it is, first of all, as you indicated, it is double the minimum lot size in the RA zone. The minimum lot size is 5,000 square feet. The existing lot is 10,000 square feet. When I wrote the letter previously asking about the condition of property, it was not to say that the property was in violation. This is merely that the property is not conforming to the current regulations of the bulk schedule. And I was asking for feedback. The onus is on the applicant to provide the data, and I was seeking just background information so I can better understand the application. I think we've heard some testimony about what might have happened, but I'll move on from that point.
Okay,
With regards
Thank
to
you.
the
Go ahead.
10,000 square foot lot, it is a large lot in Highland Park. I'm taking a look at the survey, and there are setbacks indicated on the survey, 11 feet on the north side of the garage along South 2nd Avenue. On the rear wing of the house, there is approximately between 15 to 20 feet up to the property line.
how many feet, Chris?
It's between 15 to 20 feet. On that same wing to the rear property line opposite South 2nd Avenue, the dimension's 14.9 feet, which is pretty continuous leading up to the front of the house by the porch towards Riverview Avenue, and no setbacks along Riverview Avenue, 20 feet, and then 25-foot setback on South 2nd Avenue.
Okay,
So there are pretty ample setbacks. It is not typical. I believe the rear yard setback requirement in Highland Park in the RA zone is 20 feet. Certain yards are deficient by about 5 feet, which is not a tremendous number. So the next question I'll ask is regarding the chicken coops. So, and then the, excuse me, and the
Can I
pen.
interject something for a moment?
well, of course.
I think these were in the packet, but this is from July 2nd, 1997, a requirement that the zoning permit was denied, and you had to go for a variance. There's an October 29th, 1997 letter, which I got copies from the municipality's files, the planning, saying that the zoning was approved, and are those in the packet? Are they included in the packet?
I think I may have seen that. It's irrelevant because we're dealing with current property conditions, even if the house were built in some way without variances. When your client purchased the property, this is what it looked like. And so we need to deal with what he purchased when he acquired the property. Let's let Mr., unless you have something to add to that,
Just-
let's let Mr. Cosenza.
Just that the variances were granted.
Terrific. So now we have a lawful situation of a lawful non-conforming situation. Okay, Chris, please.
Yes, and notwithstanding those variances, there are rear yard setbacks that vary between 11 to 20 feet opposite Riverview Avenue on the north side, and then approximately 15 feet opposite South 2nd Avenue. So there's a little bit of deficiency with regards to the 20-foot minimum setback requirement, not 70. So my next question leads into the structures of the coops and the exercise pen. So we're talking about three separate structures, correct? Could you just
Yes.
Could you describe the size of each one? Let's start with the, I'll call it the red one, the coop A, I believe it's on the plans.
This meeting is convened to discuss the desirability of either 2 or 3 of the 3 pieces of equipment. I'm not sure about the third one even being an issue here. The reason I'm saying that is because the third one, which we have marked Coop A on our diagrams, is completely within the principal building line. It's not in any yard. I'm not sure this board has the authority to even comment on it. No, the issue has not been raised. The zoning enforcement officer has never mentioned it. It's as if it never existed. So that's why I would like to, unless you correct me on this, I'd like to focus on Coop B. That's the one with the solar panel and the wire cage exercise pen on wheels. Can we focus on those 2 items of equipment?
We'll start with those.
Okay. What is your question about each one?
What's the size of them?
All right. The size of the Coop B is approximately 4 feet wide and 6 feet long. And by coincidence, it happens to have the same dimensions as the Oklahoma Joe smoker, of which you will see a photograph in the application. Also on wheels. So it's about the size of a residential smoker that people would have on their patio.
Hey, Mr. Burr, what's the size of the wire cage?
And the size of the wire cage is configurable. It's either 5.5 feet by 7.5 feet, or it's 5.5 feet by 14 feet.
Okay,
And the
thank
chickens
you.
will be much happier if we set it up at the 14 feet, because the whole point is to give the chickens a chance to run and flap their wings a little.
Thank you. Do you
But
know
we
the
can
size?
make it shorter.
Okay. Do you know the size of Coop A?
The size of Coop A is approximately 4.5 feet by 7.
Thank you. Okay,
That's the one that's entirely under the principal building line.
correct. Mr. Cosenza.
Okay. Given those dimensions, would they fit into either rear yard?
Either side yard. Side.
Either side.
They will fit into the side yard that we've never discussed yet, but we might as well discuss it now. That would be the side yard area between our house and our dear neighbor, Stuart Feinblatt. However,
Excuse me, can I just interrupt? Is that the gentleman that you referenced earlier that's on Second Avenue?
no, on Riverview
On
Avenue.
Riverview Avenue, thank you.
And I think someone told me that he's present tonight.
I don't know.
So the answer is yes, the coop will fit in the side yard.
The coop can fit
Can.
in that side yard. However, we are using that side yard right now for other chickens to have exercise, and those other chickens are the number of chickens that our dear neighbor has said meets with his approval, but he doesn't want to exceed that number of chickens in proximity to his house.
All right, well, your neighbors will have an opportunity
I'm sure,
to speak
I'm
for,
sure
to
they
speak
will.
for
All right,
themselves.
so potentially it can be done,
Okay,
but
terrific.
the neighbor
Let's-
is not agreeable to it.
Let's let Mr. Cosenza proceed. The neighbor will have an opportunity to tell us what he's agreeable to.
Okay, thank you. So we've established that the 2 chicken coops could fit or can fit into the side yard opposite South
Right.
Second Avenue.
Coop B. I didn't say the exercise pen will fit there. I said Coop B will fit there.
What about coop A?
You want? Okay, 1 chicken coop can fit there.
Great.
Okay, why not?
Okay, let's move on.
Okay. So you mentioned that the structures are on wheels, the 2 coops.
I did not.
Are the two coops
The
on
word
wheels?
structure has not escaped my lips. They're not structures. I don't care what a lawyer says.
Are the two chicken coops on wheels?
I'm calling them equipment.
Are the equipment on wheels?
They are equipment on wheels.
And have you moved them since its installation in
From
May?
time to time, we move them,
Okay. And
From
have you-
time
as-
to time, you move them.
such as for cleaning.
Okay. And this is associated with your home occupation business?
Mr. Cosenza, I realize it's not intentional, but if you can minimize putting words into my mouth that I did not or will not speak, this will go much more smoothly.
Okay.
We have a home occupation. We have a home occupation license for that home occupation. It's not a business.
Okay. And are those chicken coops
We
associated
are
with
not doing this to produce income.
I think the question then is this in association with your home occupation?
Yes.
Thank you.
And our home occupation goes beyond merely raising chickens. Our home occupation involves raising chickens and raising figs, apples, Asian pears, eggplants, kale, and spinach in a symbiotic relationship. Does anybody need me to explain why it's a symbiotic relationship?
Mr. Burke, I'd like to ask you a question about what you just said. You have a home occupation, you don't have a home occupation business. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. And is another word for a home occupation a hobby? Is this a hobby of yours?
I don't think the practice of raising fruits, vegetables, and poultry in a home setting is a hobby or ever has been a hobby. It has been a custom in multiple countries, including this one, for about 8,000 years.
I
But it's
understand.
closer to a hobby than it is to a business.
Okay, and I'm asking for you personally. It's not a business. You've clearly testified to that. And I'm asking if for you it's a hobby.
I'm retired. That's why I only have 31 chickens instead of 3,000. Each one of our chickens is a pet. Each chicken has a name, and I'm ready to stand here and give you the names of each of those chickens.
Thank you.
You don't have to.
Thank you. All right, let's move on. Mr. Cosenza.
I'm going to ask a question regarding the events of how this occurred. So I heard testimony that you had purchased the property in March 2021 and you started raising the chickens or installed the coops, some variation of that, starting in May 2021. And that's when it came to your attention there may be potentially be an issue with the zoning ordinance. Is that correct?
Close.
If
We-
you had an opportunity to
We did not become aware that our residential agricultural activities might be objectionable to somebody until approximately the middle of July,
Okay.
when somebody hung a notice on the doorknob saying that we can't have a chicken coop on the front lawn, to which I said, what chicken coop on what front lawn? We don't even have a front lawn.
Okay, that was the answer to the
That happened in
question.
July.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
So my question is, if you had been given the opportunity to work with the zoning officer to understand what the setbacks are, where the locations were, would you have constructed the chicken coops in a different size? Right now, we're seeing a 4x7, a 5x6. I'm not recalling all the dimensions, but I'm curious what drove the size of the structure. If you were given the and the other question is, if you were given the opportunity to put it in the side yard, would you have made the structure smaller?
Forgive me for a moment. Madam Chairman, would you like to ask the board attorney to swear in the planner because he seems to want to testify extensively?
The planner is the board's planner. He is definitionally sworn to tell the truth. He is offering his professional opinion, and we have asked him to ask you planning questions, and he's doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing. But that was a good point. Thank you for raising it.
My problem right now, logistic problem is that he spoke so long and so many subjects woven together. I couldn't find a question in there, and B, I couldn't catch up with the things he said
That's fine.
first.
I'll ask you the
I want to
question.
ask you to repeat a little more slowly. What do you want to tell us, and what do you want to ask me?
I'll just start with the question at the end. If you were able to work with the 15-foot setback on the side yard, would you have constructed your coops differently to comply with the ordinance?
Hope you're not going to go home thinking I'm a jerk, Mr. Cosenza, but the way you phrase question after question, putting words into my mouth, I don't know what to say except to object to the whole question. Are you still beating your wife?
Okay.
That's
fine.
a question from Logic Class 101. You're telling me, you want me to answer a question about constructing a chicken coop. I
Mr.
never constructed a chicken coop. I bought a piece of
Okay.
equipment. It
Mr.
comes
Barrett,
in
it's
standard
okay.
sizes. What are you asking me? Would I have chosen a different size chicken coop?
Yes, that's what he's asking
Oh,
you.
okay. Now we're back on the, closer to the same page.
Yep.
Would I have chosen like a smaller one or a bigger one or something?
Yes.
Are they
But I
available?
don't understand what are the circumstances that might
The
have prompted me to
circumstances
do that?
aren't relevant. Just answer the question.
Would
If you knew the situation, let's skip the
if I knew that somebody in government was going to assert an interest in my hobby activity, I probably wouldn't have done it at all, because this is about the smallest chicken coop you can buy, smallest piece of equipment that you can buy. The one that I said is about 4 by 6 foot. That's the one we're talking about. I don't
Okay.
know if they make one smaller than that. And if they do, it would hold 4 chickens instead of 14. And no, I'm not interested in raising 4 chickens,
Okay.
because
let's-
my wife and I need to eat some eggs for our health. We don't have a lot of money to go to the grocery store for reasons that are not relevant right now. And we need the chicken manure in order to grow the spinach and the kale and the apple trees and things. We need all the manure we can get, and we can't get enough from 4 chickens. So we wouldn't have planted apple trees either.
Okay.
We wouldn't have tried to plant spinach either, or eggplants. We would have abandoned the idea of having a garden.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Cosenza.
I think that's the end of my questions. I'm
All
ready
right.
to go into planning testimony.
Pardon me?
I'm ready to go into.
Well, why
All
don't,
right,
why don't we
Before
wait?
you do that,
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
like to give the board an opportunity to ask additional questions based on this, and then I'd like to give the public the opportunity to either make statements or ask
Yes.
questions.
Okay.
Board member questions.
May I say one more thing in answer to the question that you posed, Madam Chairman?
Of course.
Before I bought the chicken coop, and before I ordered the baby chicks, the cute little fuzzy baby chicks, I did a search in the ordinances of the Borough of Highland Park, because I wanted to know if this is a place that welcomes residential poultry or frowns on residential poultry. I wanted to know if there were regulations, if you need permission from the government to have chickens or not. And with the assistance of legal experts, we did a keyword search. We looked for chicken, we looked for poultry, we looked for birds, we looked for coop, we looked for a whole long list of words, and we couldn't find anything in any of the Highland Park ordinances that even touched on this subject, except that an itinerant poultry salesman needs to get a license for that purpose before he can go door to door selling, I guess, chicken legs or whatever he sells.
Okay, thank you. And we don't have poultry regulations. We have land use regulations with which residents need to comply. Okay, let's give the board any questions. Okay, any member of the public who would like to ask a question or make a statement, you have an opportunity.
If you-
This gentleman and then
yeah.
that gentleman.
What-
So what will happen is you'll have to pick up a mic and hold it close to your chin, please. And you
Should we
will
put-
be asked to swear or affirm to tell the truth, and to state your name and address, and then you may feel free to ask questions of the applicant, his attorney, or the planner.
Well, not so much the attorney. The attorney
Ma-
doesn't give testimony. Sir,
Madam
do you
Chair,
swear?
wanna
or-
put the mic in the stand? Is that helpful?
We don't seem to have a stand
Stand is
tonight.
right there.
Yeah.
Oh, so why did you tell me there was a stand?
I was talking about the ones on the table.
Oh,
Put in the table.
I was asking you about the stand for, okay. It's all right.
Oh, there we go.
That's utility.
No, the
No, it's
table
all-
is for you.
Sir, do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give will be the truth? So help you God.
I swear to tell the truth.
And
yes.
if you keep your voice up so I can hear you?
Yes,
And would you be kind enough to state your name, spell your last name, and give us your address, please?
yes. My name is Stuart Feinblatt, StuartFeinblatt. I reside at 137 Riverview Avenue in the adjoining property to 141 Riverview Avenue, the subject matter of this hearing.
Thank you, sir.
And I want to just give a brief statement. My wife here, Renee, is also here. I'm not really sure where to begin because we understand that there may be some limitations to what this hearing is about. But I do regret from day one that I did not speak up more forcefully about what Mr. Burr was doing. The reality is that this, and I know you did receive a report from the, if I may find it, the Environmental Commission, the Vice Chair A. Williams from the Board of Highland Park Environmental Commission. He really explained the problem in a nutshell. What he said was the main cause of the problem is that the applicant did not perform due diligence in purchasing 141 Riverview Avenue. Ignorance in municipal code is not sufficient for a variance. The bottom line here is that we have a relatively, I understand it's larger than our property, which is 50 by 100. His is 100 by 100. He has a large home. This is property that's not suitable for chicken coops at all. We should have spoken up when this first happened. Now, I do take umbrage with what Mr. Burr said. I told him day one that he said, you know, I'm a farmer, I want to raise chickens. I said, where did you raise those chickens? And he said, in Florida. I said, wonderful, great idea, great hobby. This is the wrong location for it. This is a densely populated area. You're right on our border. You should not have these chickens. He claims that 3 weeks later I suddenly said, oh, this is great once a chicken. That is not true. I tried to be conciliatory. That is my personality. I hate to have to speak right now and say what this man was done is inappropriate, but it was. The chickens should not have been allowed out of the barn to give a thing from day one. None of the chickens should be there. The chicken coop should not be there, generally speaking. I have to also, the main reason why I'm here today is I finally was able to download the application from December of 2021. I had never seen it, nor, by the way, was I provided notice with that application, even though my wife and I are the ones who have the most interest in this issue in the world other than Mr. Burr and his wife.
1 minute.
Yeah.
Mr. Feinblatt, I just want to stop you for 1 second for a clarification.
Yes.
Did you not receive notice by certified mail of this hearing?
I received notice during the summer from his counsel. Never received notice of the original application.
Well,
There
you're not
is no
entitled, there is no
requirement.
requirement for that.
Okay, well, again, I must
requirement
say,
is notice
I
of the
happen to
hearing.
be
Okay.
an attorney, but I do not practice land use law.
That's fine.
And I apologize
It's
that
okay.
if I were preparing to appear as the lawyer, I'm not. I would have fully reviewed all these papers, never would have been this unprepared.
It's not
I'm
important.
here-
It was
right.
just important to me to
Right.
know that you received notice of the hearing.
Okay, I do need to clear the record before we get to the, the merits of this, which is that he seems to suggest that we did something improper by buying the house which is adjoining to his property, which is unbelievable. We purchased this property from the builder. It was all zoned appropriately. It is a narrow space. What's that? 1989. He suggests in his papers that a highly placed state government official was able to construct this land in violation, I guess, of state law. Guess what? In 1989, I was not a highly placed state government official. I don't think I am now. I was working in private practice. I did not start working for the state until 22 years later.
Mr. Feinblatt, I don't know that this is relevant.
Well,
but-
you
but-
brought it up in
Yeah,
your-
but
yeah.
the mere fact that there's an allegation with regard to what you did in 1989 is not relevant. So I understand you take umbrage to that, but I think I can advise the board that that's not a relevant fact as to what
Right.
you did or did not do in 1989.
And I
It
can
is-
assure you that allegations about an unnamed government official have no relevance before
Right.
this board.
Well, it does upset me because it
Of
suggests
course,
that we
but
did
let's
something.
just move on with the evidence you would like to give, or questions you would like to ask, or
Well,
statements you would like to
Well,
make.
first of all, I understand we're focused more on the one on Second Avenue chicken coop, but just to be clear, the one which I guess is being described as Coop A is maybe 6 or 7 feet from our border. It is a fixed structure. It's built on, what do you call it, concrete slabs. We do have a photograph. The fact is that we get woken up every morning by those chickens. Yes, Mr. Burr was very nice. He said to me, "We're not going to have roosters." True. But we hear those chickens every morning. It is annoying. We hear them during the day. It is not the place for these chickens to be. They're literally right on our doorstep, those chickens. In addition, he does have them run free. He's right. They need space. They're at the wrong place. Under the zoning laws, this shouldn't have been allowed to begin with. You have to look at what use is being made of the property. This is inappropriate use, both there and on the other location. These chickens should not have been here. They should no longer be here. My wife will give more comments, but let's look at the legal issue. Again, I'm not an expert, but to get a variance, C variance, you have to show that the variance does not cause a substantial detriment to the public good. I would submit having these chickens anywhere on the property, letting them run free, is not to the public good.
Mr. Feinblatt, that's really sort of the crux of
Right.
what the negative criteria is talking about. But we need to know the mere fact that you state that it's not to public, it doesn't benefit the public good. In what manner? You've already mentioned specifically that you hear the chickens in the morning. What other detriments do you believe occur?
They run around the property, which I understand why he wants to do that. They shouldn't be running around. They interfere with people on the street. People walking dogs have complained about it. Driving by, it is just not the right place for this activity. I love the idea of raising chickens. I love the idea of sustainability. It should not be in this location. He talks about neighbors or people in the neighborhood loving these chickens. They come by. It's a curiosity to them. They don't live right in the vicinity of those homes, of that house. It's just not the right place for this to begin with. So we talk about noise. There's also the issue of smell of the excrement. It hasn't really bothered me much, but it is a factor.
Do you smell it, though?
Rarely. I would probably take that statement out. It's not really a problem, I must admit. And they
Okay.
do try to keep the property. His wife is a loving caretaker of the chickens, no question about it. But she's in the wrong location. This is in the wrong location. It's not consistent with, I think, the intent of our zoning laws and what use should be made of that property. It is not the location for having
Excuse me.
farming activity. It just isn't. It's too small, too close to us. The noise, the activities with the chickens. It's just not the right location. I did say that from day one. I was trying to be nice. And Mr. Burr talks about having 3,000 chickens. Those 3,000 chickens were in Florida, I guess. In a big location, big piece of property. This is just a misfit, and that's your whole raising that right to decide what should be allowed on property, what's consistent with our zoning law. Yes, what variances should be allowed, what adjustments. This does not fit at all. And the issue, I don't understand some of the things in the application. I noticed that the environmental person pointed out there were a lot of misrepresentations. I about the property, would leave that to others. But at this point, I'd like to have my wife make some other comments.
Dr. Gross, would you wait one moment, please? There was a gentleman in the back who I recognized as speaking second, and you can speak after that. Is that okay with you? Sir.
Sir, do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give will be the truth, so help you God? Would you be kind enough to give us your name, spell your last name, and give us your address, please?
Yes, my name is Steve Caruso, that's C-A-R-U-S-O, and I live at 91 Lawrence Avenue.
Thank you.
So, pardon my nervousness, this is actually my first time talking in something like this. So bear with me.
Not a problem. Nobody's going to...
So, I kind of represent a kind of a loose collective of hobbyists and stuff like that here in Highland Park, where we refer to ourselves as Highland Flock. We're a bunch of poultry enthusiasts. There are about roughly 24 of us throughout the borough. We had a booth at the last street fair. We had some of our birds on display and stuff like that. It was a big hit. A lot of the kids came by and absolutely loved it. So as you can imagine, this is a very peculiar interest to all of us, as it were, this particular case. And we in the Highland Flock Collective, for lack of a better word to put it, we understand that we live in a very special legal situation in Highland Park historically. It being a trolley town, a lot of the ordinances you expect from livestock and stuff like that that have been put in place in places like New Brunswick and surrounding municipalities were not put in place here. We have a heck of a lot of freedom in terms of what the laws say about raising poultry and stuff like that. And we do believe that it is a hobby that more and more people are looking to enjoy. A lot of people take it on as a COVID project, and it's been the idea of chicken therapy is a real thing, if I may. But we kind of loosely believe that the issue of raising poultry and just trying to be self-sustaining is, as they say, a matter of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Feeding yourself is that whole life bit, without which the other two parts kind of don't matter, if you think about it that way. And with the way the prices are going for certain foods, the price of a dozen eggs is up 500% in New York City, according to the last report back from there. However, we also do acknowledge and believe that there are ways to keep chickens and other poultry responsibly within the borough limits, and that there are a number of best practices that should be adhered to that have been established by hobbyists and by the industry for a very, very long time now. Here in Highland Park, that of course means that we need to be able to be willing to follow things such as the noise ordinance, dealing with issues of noisy birds. There are established ways to keep birds quiet. There are no-crow collars for roosters. There's soundproofing you can do to the various coops. And all of this is really a matter of trying to be a good neighbor first and foremost, because any kind of community agricultural project should be a matter of propping up the surrounding community, not causing problems for your neighbors. Following the best practices, keeping birds within the city limits, the borough limits, I should say, you can keep them quieter than virtually any neighborhood dog you're barking at 4 o'clock in the morning. But that does take effort, and that does take responsibility. Additionally, we have problems in town, since we are so close to the river. We have red-tailed hawks, goshawks, and things like that that are predators. We generally do not recommend, as part of best practices, to allow chickens to free range, because when you free range chickens in Highland Park Borough, you tend to lose all of your chickens. They kind of disappear rather quickly. Overall, in this particular case, it's made us kind of nervous. We're not really for the idea of trying to seek variances. We're for the idea of trying to stay within the current zoning laws and to be as good neighbors as possible. And if that is done in good faith, anything is possible. And that is the extent of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir. Dr. Gross?
Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give will be the truth, so help you God? Would you be kind enough to state your name, spell your last name, and give us your address, please?
My name is Grace Feinblatt, 137 Riverview Avenue, Highland Park, New Jersey.
And would you be kind enough to, I know you got a mask on, but would you be kind enough to keep your voice up? Maybe get a little closer to the mic. Great, thank you.
All right, so I have one question actually for the zoning board, and it's, I think, pertinent to this. I would like to know if the chicken coop that is adjacent to my house on 137 Riverview Avenue actually meets the requirements of the zoning board from how far it's set back from the property line. Was it ever measured? It seems very close. I wouldn't do this myself, but I wonder if that could be reviewed at some point.
Yes, it's on the survey, I believe. Mr. Cosenza can answer that question.
What do you need, the mic?
The survey. Oh,
No,
the
he needs the mic. Is the mic?
Where is the second mic?
Mr. Burr, would you give the mic to Mr. Costanza, please? Thank you.
Just to reiterate the question, you're asking if the survey shows a chicken coop on the, we'll call it the left side of the property. If you're facing,
Westerly side?
Sorry?
Westerly side?
Westerly side. One facing the street from Riverview Avenue, looking towards the house. It will be therefore on the left side. Is that the area you're referring to? According to the survey, there are, well, actually, I'm looking at a marked up survey, so let me go back. There's a few surveys in here.
I don't see one.
I have a...
Apologies. Okay, I'm looking at a planted survey. It looks like the date was cut off, but it was highlighted on the plans. There's no chicken coop shown on that side. So as far as I can understand, this is the new structure or chicken coop.
And therefore, it would be, because I heard your husband make that reference, and I was looking at the same surveyor, and I didn't see it. So would you be kind enough to give us a little bit more information as to the survey on your side of the property, which would be on the westerly side of Mr. Burr's lot?
So, he's describing the coop as...
Could you come closer to the mic, please? It's hard to hear. I know.
He was talking about the coop being a structure of 4x5, 5x7, but there actually there are two structures there. One is the coop, and there's a second structure which is a pen. So it's not just 4x5, there are two. Secondly, neither is on wheels. They are fixed, they have not been moved, and they are on concrete blocks. So if that has not been surveyed, I would suggest that it be reviewed for mutual benefit.
To that point, I think the crux of the application was the chicken coops in the front yard along the easterly side, along South Second. You're talking about two additional structures
Right.
that are not part of this application. Okay.
And let me I want to ask a clarifying question. Mr. Cosenza, the coops that we're talking about, which are off of Riverside between the Fine Black property and the subject property, we're now considering that a side yard, is that correct?
Yes. The answer
Yes.
is yes. We are considering that a side yard.
Okay.
And we don't know at this point. It would seem to me, I'll defer to Chris, but if the side yard setback is 20 feet, correct?
For principal structures. For an accessory structure, meaning not attached to the house, it will be an accessory structure setback, which is 5 feet.
5 feet. Okay.
That's the minimum requirement.
And is it true that we don't know whether those structures are 5 feet from the property line?
We have no way of knowing. And I also have concerns with the building coverage requirements. It may be going way over at this point.
How did we get to this point and not know that? You don't have to answer that, but thank you for raising that point. Of course.
Just reading through all of the complaints in there were so many false allegations that I'm not going to go through all.
It's, there are many allegations, none of which are forming the basis for a board decision.
Well, Ms. Feinblatt, if you would be kind enough, as your husband indicated and as I indicated, that there is a need to discuss the provisions of the municipal land use law, and it's the positive criteria and the negative criteria. I asked him to provide specific facts that might indicate what your concerns are with regard to the negative criteria. In other words, how it may substantially affect the impact on surrounding properties. Now, he mentioned the fact that there was noise in the morning, and I guess I'm trying to find out if you had any other additional concerns other than what your husband said.
As I share his concerns, and again, with the issue of the chickens roaming free, people walking dogs, it's a problem for them. And also when you drive past, you really have to be extra careful that the chicken does not run into the street and you hit it.
So what you're saying is that you've observed the chickens not in the pens, but rather roaming free on your side of the property?
No, not on my property.
No, on your side of the property. In other words, let me rephrase that.
They did, and I commented on it to his wife. And so what they did, there's overgrown bushes and they stuffed garbage on the side so that the chickens could not enter.
Okay, I clearly did not make my question clear enough. I'm not suggesting that the chickens roamed onto your property, but they did, but they're not now. But my question is that the chickens are roaming free on Mr. Burr's property, but that portion of the property that's on the western side of his lot, which is abutting your property. Is that what you're testifying to?
No, they're in his front yard.
You better talk to your husband.
Well, they're right next to us, but they're
Okay.
being bumped.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for the applicant or the planner at this time? Yes, ma'am. And then, sir, did you have a hand up? Okay, you'll be next, and you after that.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give will be the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Would you state your name, spell your last name, and give us your address?
Lois Leving, L-E-B-B-I-N-G, North Second Avenue. And north is very important to differentiate from south. You keep getting mail from the south side. Yes.
And I apologize, I did not catch your address, I'm sorry.
North Second Avenue.
Thank you.
Not South Second. I grew up in Middlebush. We had chicken farm 2 doors down. The eggs are wonderful. They sold it to the public. I don't know. They had so many chickens they must have. But there are creatures called poultry flies. I don't know if that'll happen with a half a dozen or 2 dozen critters in Highland Park. Highland Park's code or master plan or zoning ordinance back in the 80s used to say no farm animals. In general, farm animals. And roosters? No roosters? I wish the owner was here. Maybe somebody here knows. My father grew up on various different farms. Milk cows, horses, asparagus. You gotta have roosters once or twice a year to have eggs. That's what he kept drilling into me. You gotta have roosters. That's how it works. And there is certainly in Highland Park lots of deer manure, and that's vegan for somebody who needs to have a good farm, a good garden, and apple orchards or something. I don't have a question, but I think that would be, picture this next to your house. There is summer, maybe they're very diligent to keep the place clean, but roosters, they make noise.
Thank you. Sir?
Sir, do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give will be the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Would you state your name, spell your last name, and your address?
My name is Arya Wiesel, W-I-E-S-E-L. I live at 203 North 3rd Avenue.
Thank you.
So I wanted to just address some of the things that were brought up in this meeting. Number one, you don't need a rooster present for eggs to be produced. Chickens ovulate every 24 hours, and you don't need a male present. The only difference is if you have a male present, the eggs can be hatched. They will be fertilized. They will produce eggs regardless if a male is present or not. With regard to the flies, that's not, so I've been raising chickens in town for about 7 years now, and I've done extensive research, not just on to raise chickens in this town, but also on the poultry industry as a whole. And coops are never referred to as equipment in the commercial industry. Yes, they are. They will generally be a stationary or movable housing unit, but they're not considered equipment. I would think also that someone who, so where I live, we have quite a spacious area between the sidewalk and the curb, probably about 8 feet wide, and maybe like 25 or 35 feet long. Now I thought, oh wow, that's a great place where I could pasture poultry if I wanted to, but just not, besides the ordinance theft, my birds, anyone walking by could open up the coops and bother the birds or take them. You know, there are dogs, there are kids, there are people. So as, you know, just common sense is not to do it there. You know, I understand that some people, you know, move to the suburbs to get away from, you know, so that they don't have to deal with livestock or other animals. But some of us do like to be able to be in control, or at least try to be sustainable and just, you know, be in control of where our food comes from. And we understand that, you know, it's not going to appeal to everyone. So we do take into account the ordinance of, you know, keeping the coops the proper distance from the fence. We try to, you know, add visual barriers, not just shrubs and fences, just not for just visual or aesthetic purposes, but also to muffle noise. I don't keep roosters. I personally have rehomed a number of hens who were consistently loud, even though I could technically keep them, but they would be disturbing my neighbors, so I made the choice to rehome them. You know, there are people in town that have dogs, cats, children. There's a lot of things that make noise in this town, and you really can't just narrow it down to one thing that's going to bother you. I mean, I hear the trains all manner of the day. You know, I hear them at 11 o'clock at night. Should we stop running the trains? Because I don't like it.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Anything else? Thank you very much. Sir.
Sir, do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give will be the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Would you be kind enough to state your name, spell your last name, and your address?
I'm Peter Spool, that last name is S-P-O-L-L, like with a thread, and it is 146 Graham Street. That's on the corner of South Side. I walk down to the park with my wife, which is every day, and pass by Mr. Burris.
Do you mind keeping your voice up, because I'm having a hard time hearing you?
Is that better?
I'm having a hard time hearing you too.
To turn up the volume?
I don't know.
Is that better?
Not especially.
Not much.
I can't talk more loudly.
All right. Well, we'll do our best. And if I interrupt you because I didn't catch something, I'll just ask you to repeat yourself, please.
Fine.
All right.
I suggest you get some more professional person to deal with the equipment in the future.
Sounds like a plan to me.
If you have the influence to be able to do that.
We'll ask.
So I pass by Mr. Burr's property virtually every day, coming and going to Donaldson Park where I walk with my wife. Don't find the chickens particularly loud. Sometimes they do some bucking. I'm sorry that it seems to bother you. Where we live, there were dogs that bark much louder late at night. There's not much I can do about that. I just deal with it. As the equipment, the coops, whatever, you know, I noticed in walking around town, there are people who have lawn furniture on their front lawns, tables, chairs. They seem to be there all spring, all summer, into the fall. Maybe they get packed up for the winter. Nobody seems to complain about those. I'm not aware that anybody feels that it violates the zoning laws. Those are right out there in the middle of the lawns. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't seem to bother anybody else. I don't know why the coops bother anyone.
Okay. Oh,
I
sorry.
don't see a problem with them. I don't know why it seems to be a problem to any of the administration.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your,
And I think a lot of time has been spent on this by many members of the administration. And I think it's a waste of taxpayer money.
okay, thank you. Would any other members of the public like to be heard at this time? Mr. Cohen?
Sir, do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give will be the truth? So help you God.
Yes, I do.
Na-
My name is Ira Cohen, that's IRA, COHEN, 212 Valentine Street. I wasn't going to speak tonight, but after hearing all of this, I want to point out two things. Number one, that side of Riverview has no sidewalks, so this property goes right up to the street. The chickens are regularly in the street. I also walk the neighborhood at different hours of the day, and the chickens are there in the street, not in the pen, but are allowed to walk there in the street, and right up to the curb. I'm also told by many of my neighbors that they can't walk by the house in any way. That side of the street, because the dogs get really agitated by the chickens. And also, we haven't said this word, but they're really an eyesore. They're not a pretty thing. You know, it's one thing to have lawn furniture, but I don't see these as pretty things. They're right there. They're not, you know, it'd be one thing if there was a large piece of property in the backyard and nobody saw it. You know, much like a shed that's deteriorating. This is right there on the corner. This is a corner property. Both sides of the property are exposed, and it's really an eyesore. You know, this is not a farming community. And those are my comments.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so we seem to have lost your client.
Outside the door, if I can have a minute.
Sure.
Of course. We can take a 5-minute break.
You got me.
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman, is your client coming back?
Well, that's true, too.
Is he coming back?
He's here.
Okay. After that little break, the board remains in session. All right. Mr. Kaufman,
Yes.
do you have any more testimony that you want to put on
I
tonight?
really would ask my client one or two questions.
Sure.
All right. With regard to the chickens running into the road and running free, is that the case?
Someone in this room is telling a fib, and someone else is telling
Without
two fibs.
Without commenting, please just answer my question. Do the chickens just run around free, unaccompanied?
Never.
Who accompanies them? Or what are the circumstances? Understand
The
my
question, what are the circumstances, is an invitation to a narrative, and I accept your invitation. If we were going to be allowed by the powers that be to deploy the wire chicken exercise pen, there would not ever be any chickens wandering around the property because they'd be confined inside the pen and getting exercise protected from dogs, deer, foxes, raccoons, and red-tailed hawks. But until we get the blessing from this board, the chickens have two choices, either to stay cooped up all day and all night or to get out and get a little exercise. So pending the decision of this board, they're getting exercise by walking around our property, accompanied by my dear wife, who walks with them and is constantly with them. They are never wandering, running amok, free-ranging, or any of those other things that I've heard tonight in this room. She is with them, supervising them. In addition, chickens are very territorial. They set their boundaries, and they stay within their boundaries, and their boundaries does not include the road, the street, the pavement.
Okay,
The question, why did the chicken cross the road, never comes up.
great. Mr. Kaufman, did you have another question?
No.
Okay, so in terms of presenting your case, have you put in all of the evidence that you're prepared to enter into evidence? Okay,
Hold on a second.
of course.
Are you aware of other properties that they have things in their front yards?
We traveled up and down the streets of the south side of Highland Park and took photographs of dozens of other properties. We took photographs of front yards of dozens of other properties, and that gallery of photos is appended at the very end of our lengthy application.
Great,
We did
and
not put addresses on there or names of property owners. We're not trying to snoop or embarrass anybody, but simply to show the wide variety of what Councilor Thomas calls structures that people deploy on their front yards throughout the south side of Highland Park. And to our knowledge, nobody's complaining about any of those other things.
Do you have
That's it.
any other questions? Okay, so please make yourself comfortable. Mr. Burr, feel free to sit or stand, whatever best suits you.
Would you be kind enough, before you do that, Mr. Burke, would you be kind enough to give the microphone over to Mr. Costanza? Thank you.
Okay. So Mr. Cosenza is the board's licensed professional planner, and he is the only planner in this case. And the board will rely on the guidance that we get from Mr. Cosenza. So, Mr. Cosenza, would you be good enough either to go through if there are any remaining issues in your review letters that we've not gotten to, that we've not reached? And if we've reached all of the issues, would you be kind enough to advise us as to whether or not the criteria for C variances have been met, please?
Sure, will do. Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe at the beginning of the application, Mr. Thomas, you had indicated that the question regarding the use variance, the D variance, had basically gone away by virtue of the zoning permit application that was approved for a home occupation. So the only matter at hand is really the bulk or C variance relative to only the structures that are in the front yard area along South 2nd Avenue. Whether they protrude 1 inch or 2 feet, or what have you. It violates the zoning ordinance and a bulk variance is required. According to the municipal land use law, you can grant a C variance under really either 1, a hardship, or 2, what's called a flexible C. So I'm going to go over both situations and kind of, because you could make the argument it's either or, and you have the option to discuss the merits on both. So for the benefit of the applicant, I would figure I would go over both of them.
Thank you.
With regards to the C1 variance, which is commonly referred to as the hardship variance, with respect to the positive criteria, the applicant must meet the basically the physical features test. For example, is the lot exceptionally narrow? Is it really shallow? Is there a certain shape that prohibits a construction with a proposal that is at hand? In this case, you have a very large lot. It's square, very easy to work with, and it's oversized according to the ordinance, notwithstanding the structure is sitting on it. So it doesn't meet that criteria. So subsection B is by reason of exceptional topographic conditions, meaning is there a slope condition that prohibits structures to be built upon? In this case, the property is rather flat from what I could tell, so I don't believe it meets that criteria. And C, by reason of extraordinary situation uniquely affecting a specific piece of property or a structure is lawfully existing thereon. In this case, the applicant's best case is probably subletter C with regards to the size of the structure, which compresses the rear yard or side yards opposite the streets. However, I think we heard testimony that there is sufficient space to put these small chicken coops. In fact, apparently there are already structures in those side yards that are there. So I don't believe the hardship criteria is being met, so I'm going to move on to the positive criteria on a C2. This is commonly referred to as a flexible C variance. So in this case, the applicant doesn't need to prove hardship. Instead, it's looking for a situation that shows that the application with this specific property, that the purposes of the municipal land use law is advanced by this application. And that is referring to the, I believe, subsection 2. This is NJSA 40:55D-2, basically the purposes of municipal land use zoning in New Jersey. There are, I believe, 17 lettered items, and I struggle to find which any one of them that this application might apply to. So I'll move on to the second one, which is that the the purposes of zoning would be advanced by deviation from the ordinance, and I should have did that part. So subsection B of the flexible C variance would be that the public benefits of the deviation substantially outweighs the detriment. The key thing, key phrase there is the public benefits, and I think Mr. Thomas, you had talked about that in discussions with a member of the public, I believe the property next door. That is a key phrase, the public benefits to the application. What this means is that the zoning benefits resulting from permitting what's being requested has to be advancing the sort of the improved zoning and planning, that this is a better alternative for the community, not the person that it serves. It sounds like that this application serves the applicant only, and I haven't heard anything that this benefits the community. And this is only relative to the structures in the front yard. This has nothing to do with the actual use of the structures, which is chickens, raising chickens. I think we've heard a lot of commentary on that, and I'm just going to push that off the side. It's not relevant to this particular discussion. We're only focusing on the merits of the bulk variance request of the structures within the front yard. That's it. Unfortunately, this means the only logical place to put the structures according to the zoning ordinance is to put it into that side yard, which is apparently offending the neighboring property owners. And we don't have any information showing what those structures, the size of them, the location, the setbacks. I'm a little concerned about that, but I like to focus on the variance request, which is the front yard variance request. And so that's relative to the positive criteria. There's a second part of that, which is relative to the negative criteria, and it applies to both the C1 or the C2. In this case, let's focus on the C2. That's probably the closest one that the applicant approved. Basically, the applicant needs to provide testimony to satisfy the negative criteria, really in two parts. One, that the variance can be granted without substantial detriment to public good, and will not substantially impair the intent and purpose of the master plan and zoning ordinance. Again, I struggled listening to the testimony, find that there was anything that shows that this request would be, that could be granted without substantial impact to the public good. Basically, what we're asking is, on a corner lot, can any applicant just put structures in the front yard and just be granted the variance just because it's on a corner lot? I don't think that meets the spirit of the master plan and zoning ordinance, which is a lawn area that is modestly maintained and is free of structures. That's the whole point of the front yard setback requirement. As with respect to the intent and purpose of the master plan and zoning ordinance, it's pretty clear. No structures are permitted in the front yard. And I don't believe we should be starting to grant variances just because the applicant wants them there. It sounds like what the applicant wants is to keep the structures there, as opposed to working with the zoning official and the construction code official, being ample opportunity to relocate them in other areas. The fact that there may be not enough room might be indicative of the fact that there just might be too many structures related to the chicken coop or chicken bit. There might be just too many chickens. But again, we're only here about the structures in the front yard, not about the home occupation.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so having heard from Mr. Cosenza, I invite questions from the board, questions of Mr. Cosenza. Any further questions of the applicant? Questions for the planner from board members? I do have a question related to the definition. I do have a question related to the definition of a home occupation. That's a fairly recently adopted ordinance. Matt, you don't happen to remember that in any great detail, I'm guessing, right?
I do not. I believe it was prior to my time, but
It was prior to your time. So my question is, does a home occupation mean an occupation? And does a home hobby, is a home hobby anticipated within that definition of a home occupation?
My interpretation is that the home occupation, as it's currently defined, any activity carried out for gain by a restaurant.
Any activity carried out for what?
For gain.
For gain.
Which implies a business act.
All right.
I don't believe the zoning ordinance intended to regulate hobbies.
Right, I don't think so.
Otherwise, you couldn't have a card collecting business.
Right.
Business or hobby in your own home. This ordinance is not, any ordinance that I'm aware of does not intend to regulate hobbies.
And the testimony's been very clear that there's no intent for there to be any financial gain from the selling of eggs. So it would fall under the definition of a hobby rather than a home occupation.
Perhaps.
And then I, of course, have a question about the situation on the side yard that runs from
Yes, on
Riverside,
the westerly side.
Riverview, that runs from Riverview. And there are these structures, permanent structures on concrete, and there's no information with which we've been provided about whether or not they're within the setback requirements, and potentially would need a variance in order to not to be required to be removed. We don't know that. That wasn't provided to us. And that's not for want of asking, because we have in your review letter a request for a survey that clearly delineates where the coops are. So I don't know the answers here about whether this is a permitted use in this zone at all.
That's my concern as well.
A, whether or not it's a permitted use, and B, whether or not those structures, coops A and C, are they? A and B are the ones that are between your house and the Feinblatts? Which are the ones that are between your house and the Feinblatts? A and which one?
Madam Chairman, in order to avoid semantic confusion, the diagram that you see in the application with yellow highlight, I'm not sure that the chairman's copy has color pages or not.
No, I do.
So if the clerk can possibly bring up the application on a monitor, is that possible?
I actually have it
yes,
on my
thank
own
you.
computer.
Is this the one you're talking about?
Absolutely, thank you very much. This laptop shows the marked up diagram with yellow highlight showing the position of 3 pieces of equipment marked A, B, and C. To clarify, Coop A is completely under the eaves of the roof within the principal building line, not in any yard, and for that reason is not subject to regulation under the zoning ordinance, as well as I understand it. I might be wrong, and we have 3 lawyers in the room who can set me straight if I made a mistake there.
Mr. Burr, I'm sorry, I'm looking for, I printed out from the copy that I have, and
May I see this one more time?
I'm not seeing highlights.
May I pass it to the chairman? Thank you.
Mr. Burr, is this one?
Is that highlighted?
It is.
It is?
I see that one is highlighted. Yes, that's the one. But no, that was an intermediate one. I'm sorry. Do you see yellow here?
I do.
Okay, that's the one. Madam Chairman,
Sure.
Yeah, that's the one.
you see the yellow color?
I see it. Okay, here we go.
Those pages that are not numbered.
So it's A and B that are.
Coop A is completely behind the principal building line on both sides, and therefore is not in any yard at all, because a yard is defined as the area between the principal building line and the lot line by the street, if I'm saying this correctly. So it's not in any yard, it's not the subject of this application, it doesn't need a variance. It's not affixed to the land, it's on wheels, it's under the eaves of the roof, it's not the subject of the variance application. Coop B is the offender, if there is one. Coop B protrudes beyond the building line, which is the vertical projection of the gutters on the roof overhang. And Coop B protrudes about 24 to 30 inches beyond that building line, and it protrudes because it's a piece of solar-powered equipment. It has solar panels on the top,
Okay,
and it needs to get sunlight.
Thank you so much
Coop-
for clarifying
Number
for
C,
me.
equipment number C is the wire cage. It's not there right now, it's in the garage. We are asking for the blessing of this board to be able to use the cage so that the chickens will be restrained and not be walking around,
Okay.
which was a cause of some concern. Mr. Feinblatt, my dear neighbor, is talking about a different coop that's not in the application, it's not shown on the drawing.
Aha.
And I would like to explain where that is by putting my finger on somebody's drawing right now. Our application does not concern that coop because it's never become an issue of concern to the zoning officer. The zoning officer didn't see any reason why it would even need a permit. Mr. Feinblatt came in and expressed some concern this evening, but it's not part of this application.
Okay, thank you
Now,
so much.
I would like to show somebody where that coop is located.
Show me.
Okay, so I'm going to put my finger where that coop is located. Oh, I have a pen.
It's in the back.
That coop is located right here, and if you can share that with the other members, it would be a big help.
Like a circle?
I don't want to draw on your copy,
Oh, you can.
but here, this line is the brick wall of the house, and then this line is the property line, and then the coop is between the brick wall and the property line, and it's set back approximately 5.5 to 6 feet from that property line, which means it's not encroaching on the setback, but the neighbor has expressed that he feels a little crowded by its presence there. That's what the issue is, and I was not aware of that, and so I'm going to apologize to him either tonight or tomorrow, but that's where it's located. And the others?
The other people.
Oh, yes,
This
please.
one.
All right. Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, thank you so much.
Has everybody got it?
Everybody, yes, I've seen it. Has everybody seen it?
I can point on anybody else's drawing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I saw it on Rob's computer.
Madam Chair,
Yeah, please.
I've actually two questions.
Yes.
Like with all our discussion, where these individual objects are and how permanent they are or not how permanent they are, makes me concerned about, is that something we can actually decide? Or like the question is where, well, like, do we have enough information to make a decision, because we really don't know where the things they are. What I'm concerned about, or what I'm seeing, is also which one of these two plans submitted shall I believe? Is it like this plan or is it that plan?
That plan.
Yeah, but if there's two plans submitted, so which one is to be believed?
The applicant has indicated that the plan
Okay.
you're now referring
Okay.
to is the plan that's the only one that
Okay.
indicates where the coop or the equipment, as he describes them, are located, which are on the easterly side of the property.
Okay. So my second question is, what I understand, these objects have all a closed roof, so they would add to impervious lot coverage. And my question is, how much, like we don't have any proof what the lot coverage is right now. How much is that at the edge, or how much more are we adding to the lot coverage? My only indication is that other, let's say, non-official, like this one, which gives us, there's probably even additional objects in the back that are probably adding to lot coverage that we don't know about. It doesn't matter to us as board members if this is part of this application or not. It's an adding of lot coverage in a situation where I don't see any proof of.
Yeah, but I've got to add, just as, the issue has been raised with regard to home occupation.
Yeah.
That may or may not turn out to be the case, but it's not before this board. You don't have jurisdiction over that matter.
Sure.
The fact of the matter is that the zoning officer, based upon the information he had at that time, issued a zoning permit. The only application that's before you is a C variance for these three
Okay.
well, I call them structures, he calls them equipment. Whatever you want to call them, they are still, that's all you have a jurisdiction over, and all you have the jurisdiction over is the variance that is being required because of the location of those structures. And therefore, what you're saying is that, is there an additional problem with regard to additional impervious coverage
Yeah.
on a lot that is already in violation of, or close to being in violation of? Unfortunately, there is part of the problem. Could that be a negative? It could be, but unfortunately, you're right. We don't have enough information to make a determination one way or the other. So you have information that's in front of you about what Mr. Burr has said, what he's testified to, and you've had information as to what the members of the public have said. So that's what you're really dealing with.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chairman, may
Sir.
I be permitted to respond to a concern expressed by Mr. Hoofer?
Briefly.
Thank you. Mr. Hoofer, you raised the issue of permeability for the first time in this meeting, and I'd like to respond to that. I'm not the world's expert on that subject, but we did confer with the surveyor who prepared the survey to get his assistance to calculate the permeability. And based on the numbers that we received from him, and comparing with the numbers in Schedule 3, which is of the essence of this matter, in Schedule 3, we are from 30 to 45% over the permeability limits for a property from day one, from the day this present principal dwelling was constructed. We're already 30 to 45% over the permeability. And if two chicken coop roofs, one 4x6 and the other one 4.5 by 7.5, are going to create too much additional runoff into the roads, then those chicken coops need to be abated. And conversely, if that much extra rainwater is not going to create a runoff problem, they don't need to be abated. I am a member of Sustainable Highland Park. I've served on that committee now for approximately 14 months, and I've been an active contributing member to that committee. It exists as a commission, by commission of the Borough Council. And on that committee, we work very hard on problems involving runoff, maintenance of storm drains, and so forth. We have started an adopt-a-drain program. I personally have adopted 3 drains, and I take personal responsibility for making sure that those 3 drains operate correctly. The drains on our corner property is the last stop before the Raritan River. In other words, the corner of 2nd Avenue and Riverview Avenue is the last drain before you get to Donaldson Park and the Raritan River Basin. And so I have very strong feelings about permeability and runoff and so forth, and because of that, we have converted our gutter and downspout system to a cistern system where instead of having runoff and water running into the street and going into the storm drains, it's going into rain barrels, cisterns to collect that water, and we use that water for irrigation.
Okay.
We use that water to water trees and flowers and vegetables.
Thank you, thank you. The issue has to do, the issue that's being raised by a board member has to do with what's called impervious coverage of a lot. And under the Highland Park ordinance, there are limits on every lot for what percentage of the lot is required to be pervious. And when you add structures with roofs, that increases the impervious coverage. And you're telling me you already exceeded the impervious coverage limit on your lot. We don't have information about that, and we cannot deal with that tonight. So what we're going to do is the board will make a determination with respect to the request for the C variance only. So with that, I invite any other members or any members of the public who've already spoken who have any further questions or comments to speak now.
I have a sort of a legal question, I think.
Yeah, let's just wait until we finish with the public, okay?
Okay.
Okay. All right. The public portion of the hearing is now concluded. Rob?
As to structure or equipment C, I understand there's no roof on that. That's just a net or a cage at the top, right?
Item C on the plan of survey, that is a wire cage. It's a wire cage. There's no solid area involved. It's mesh.
So, given that the testimony is it's going to be moved around, to me, it seems sort of like a trampoline with nets on the side that kids jump on. Like, how do we make it? Are we supposed to make a determination on something that's intended to be moved every couple of days?
The question of movement is really, I mean, it's a unique, somewhat circumstance, but it's not necessarily relevant. In other words, it doesn't really matter that it's being moved 5 feet here today and 7 feet there tomorrow. The question is whether or not the movement of it is in violation because it's located in a setback area in the front yard. So if it's moved today and it's in 19 feet, and tomorrow it's 15 feet, and the next day it's moved because, as Mr. Burr has indicated, he wants to end up giving the grass some opportunity to grow, and therefore he's not going to wear it out in one location. It's going to be moved around. But nonetheless, the movement is really, in that sense, irrelevant. It's a question of the fact that the movement still is all in an area that is not authorized by the ordinance. Okay? Does that help? It does. Good.
Okay. Is there a board member who would like to make a motion to approve or to deny?
May I ask one more question? I keep hearing references to front yard. I'm not aware of having any equipment in a front yard.
Well, you are, because you have a dual lot, and by definition, a dual lot has two front yards. You have a front yard on Riverview, and you have a front yard on South 2nd Street. That's by not only the municipal land use law, but also by case law that's governing this area of law. So you do have two front yards. Therein lies, and that's what a corner lot is, as has been indicated earlier. That's what you have, and that's what you. By the way, do I understand that you do not own this property, that you rent it?
I understand from reading a deed that anybody who acquires the use of the property is a tenant, and a tenant in fee simple.
So you are a tenant.
You want to discuss what a tenant is and what a fee is and what simple is?
I just misunderstood you. I thought I had heard that you were a renter, not an owner. But I understand you are an owner of the property.
I didn't say I'm an owner or a renter, but I said I'm a tenant, and that's all I said.
Doesn't matter.
I would like to know, where can I read that this property has two front yards? I've had trouble finding that.
You can read it either in the municipal land use law or in the ordinances of this town. Yes, ma'am.
Well, the property actually is owned by a foundation, so does that change change the circumstances at all?
It really doesn't, because Mr. Burr is in fact the principal of that foundation.
And any relief or non-relief that this board grants goes to the land, right? And not to an individual. So it's irrelevant who the owner is.
What I would ask is that I've mentioned this before, and I think it's appropriate. I certainly mentioned it in all D variances, but I think it's also appropriate in the C variance. And I think it's better for the board to have a motion in favor of the variance. And I say that from a procedural point of view only. And I say that to you as board members, and I say that to the members of the public. I am not suggesting that you should vote in favor of the variance. I am saying that by putting a variant, the motion in favor, you then clearly understand that if you vote yes, you are voting in favor of the variance. If you vote no, you are voting against the variance. So that's a very simple thing, as opposed to some other motion that gets confused, because I've had that situation occur, and then people say, well, I didn't realize that that's what I was voting on. So if you have an affirmative vote, you know you're voting in favor of the variance. If you have a negative vote, you know you're voting against the variance. So with that, Madam Chair, I think that that's the motion you should solicit.
All right, so, I would ask that the motion then be to approve this application with conditions, and the board will discuss what conditions, assuming that it's going to be granted, what conditions we would attach to it. Is there somebody who would like to make such a motion?
Yeah, I make a motion to approve the application.
Subject to the conditions we determine.
Subject to the conditions, and we will discuss. Yeah.
Thank you.
What were
Is
those
there a-
conditions?
We don't have them yet. We will
We're
develop
going
those
to
conditions.
develop the conditions as we discuss
If
the
there are any.
application.
If there are
If there are any.
So at the moment, I'm just making the motion to approve the application, and when we discuss, and then
You'll
we
amend the
make-
motion.
Then, yeah.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you. All right, discussion.
Now discussion.
You want to ask a question?
Before we vote, I have a question.
Oh, you're not voting
Okay,
yet.
We're not
No,
voting.
no,
yet.
no.
We're going to discuss the
Yes,
condition.
yes.
Well, we're going to
If there
discuss
are
the
any.
application.
I'm okay,
There
thank
may
you.
or may not be conditions.
Okay.
All right. Comments? Discussion? I always wait until the end to give comments. If I don't hear any comments, I'm going to begin.
Would you like me to just make a few comments with regard to the positive and negative criteria?
Sure. You want to reiterate what Chris has said?
Yeah.
Sure.
As indicated, as you all know, but for members of the public, in order to establish a variance, you must meet both the positive and the negative criteria. This is a C variance, and you have the ability as an applicant to either have a C1 variance or a C2 variance. Chris has already described what those are. The C1 is a hard variance, reference to hard, meaning generally with regard to physical features involving a specific piece of property. The C2 variance is dealing with a more flexible variance, and it deals with whether or not there is an advancement of a purpose of zoning, or whether or not the benefits of granting the variance further outweigh any of the detriments. You also then, as you know, have to meet, if you meet those standards, you have to meet the negative criteria. The negative criteria is also very simply put that you have to establish that there's no substantial detriment to the public good, and that there's no substantial impediment to the intent and purpose of the zone plan and the zoning ordinance. So what that's really talking about is every variance by definition has some detriment. That's by definition because it's in violation of the ordinance. But, and what you're looking for is a substantial detriment, and you have to define what that is in your own minds. So you have heard the testimony of Mr. Burr in terms of what he has testified in regard to the issue of sustainability. In his mind, that's a positive rather than negative, and you've heard the members of the public indicating what their concerns are in relation to this application, and you have to decide whether or not that's substantial. So those are the areas that you need to get involved in terms of your thought process regarding this variance application.
So,
Nobody
thoughts?
Please.
So it's very difficult in a way, and so the listening to your testimony, there is clearly no hardship. It's a large property. It's a very beautiful large home, and any other use of that would be just fine. A regular front yard, or like every yard use, what we usually do, would be just fine. So the issue. So there's no hardship with the property in itself in terms of physical things or anything. So the questions are, for me, in terms of what's the positive aspect, what would be a possible positive aspect for the idea how this brings the sustainability wishes for Highland Park forward. That would be, if that was so large, that these few objects on a private property would contribute significantly to moving all our working together, making Highland Park a more sustainable and resilient place? Does that add to it? That's my question, right? That's what I'm thinking about right now. And I don't see how putting, and I get the whole point of having a more, like the whole food production issue, that like topic that people in the public were saying that we want to make a closer, we don't want to have so much transportation, all these important things. So having food close to home but the thing is, if these additional individual chicken coops would bring that substantially forward for Highland Park as a community, and that is for me hard to see right now.
Thank you.
That's just my, I don't know if you guys have more thoughts on that, it would be great.
Yeah, I don't see it either. It's not a scalable solution that really impacts the community at large.
Other comments?
I guess I would say on the negative criteria on the flexible C2, I guess, having been by the property, I'm not sure I see a substantial detriment to the public good. I mean, they're relatively close to the house. They're kind of tucked in behind the tree line. So I could possibly see that maybe being reached, but I don't see the proofs to kind of demonstrate the other parts of the C2 variance. I mean, yes, it could be a property that you could look to as demonstrating sustainability goals in town. But your point, it's not all that scalable, and it's a giant house that already maximized the footprint of the property, and so it's just not a great location. And we want to think about if these types of variances start to get approved everywhere, like there's going to be there could be chicken coops in front yards all over the place, and so we have to balance the effect of giving a variance in this case in a front yard to what would come down the pike. I love the idea of the sustainability of it. I think raising chickens is great. I think the idea of moving them around is great. I'm just not certain that this is the right property for that many. So I'm not sure that the proofs have been met.
And like one more little thought. Sorry, one more little thought on it is to say, how much does this contribute to the interest of zoning? When we look at how does it change? I know these are like small pieces and objects. It's a little bit like placing a number of garbage bins in the front in a way, like size-wise, big-wise, and so the whole character of the street, it's wide open front yards. Like it's a very typical wide open street, not many driveways, so it's very wide and open, and so these so granting this variance would not support the character of the town in a positive way. That's my additional thought on this. They're small. Yeah, go ahead.
Please. Go ahead. What? Does somebody want to speak?
Well, I don't think that the character of the town is to have wide open front yards. That, in fact, as demonstrated by the photos at the end, there's all kinds of people are putting stuff in their front yards. Trampolines, dog houses, what else is there?
So
hammocks.
The only thing I'm saying that at this part is that it's relatively, like on this part of Second Avenue, it is relatively open. We don't have that. Like when the point that you were making, when we grant this and like we add to all these things, how does the town character change? When we had all these different additional objects in the front yards and give up, if we would say, do we give up the backyard or the front yard? Is this changing our front yard? Like, did we give up the whole front yard? What's it called?
There's a term you're looking for. Is it affecting the streetscape of this particular?
Exactly. That's what I'm looking for.
I don't think it is. These are tucked up against the house. There's many people in our town that have gardens that go all the way to the edge and have deer fences in front of them, or the equivalent of deer fence.
So we wouldn't.
And we don't seem to have any problem with those. I don't, personally, I don't have any problem with them.
Yeah, disagree.
Yes.
Other
Yes.
comments?
I have seen such a house.
Yeah.
Okay, so before I give comments on the application, I would like to note, Mr. Thomas, the board sends a letter to the governing body every year, and we tell them the cases that we've heard and how they were determined. We tell them the board sends a letter every year to the governing body, and we tell the governing body the cases that we heard and what the determinations were. And based on the cases we heard, what recommendations we have to the governing body for potential amendments to the borough zoning ordinance. And so I'd like Mr. Thomas to make a note that my recommendation this year is that the ordinance with respect to home occupations be reviewed and clarified as to whether that means an occupation for fiscal gain or whether or not that includes a hobby, which is the situation we seem to have here. In addition, I would want, as part of the home occupation section of the ordinance review, I would ask the governing body to look at what they want done with front yards in town. Is it okay to put chicken coops in your front yard, or is that a home occupation that's more appropriate for a backyard? So that we're going to, I would ask that this year, that's our recommendation. The governing body doesn't have to act on that recommendation, but it's guidance to the governing body based on the Board of Adjustment's experience that we're asking them to look at it. We're not telling them what to do, but we're asking them to see the situation that arose tonight, and that there's missing information both from the applicant as well as a lack of clarity in that particular aspect of our ordinance.
Am I allowed to disagree slightly?
Say again, please.
Am I allowed to disagree slightly?
Of course.
The chicken coops are a special case of a more general case of how people use their front yards. And to say that chicken coops are what we're interested in understanding is not, in my opinion, not the issue. The issue is how do we use our front yards. And this is, in this case, is a very, very small piece of Mr. Burr's front yard.
I may have misspoken, but I would ask, I thought I had said that we would like to ask the governing body to think about what uses they would like to be made of front yards, and I gave chicken coops as an example, but thank you for the clarification. So that aside from this application, based on the testimony of the planner, I don't hear any purposes of the municipal land use law that would be advanced by granting this application. I reviewed again tonight, as I do before every C variance application, the purpose of the zoning in the municipal land use law. And the only potentially relevant purpose of zoning which might be applicable in a situation that we have here is to promote a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangement. And that as a purpose of zoning is not only not met, but to my aesthetic, to my taste, it's the opposite. I find those chicken coops not to be attractive in a front yard. The block that we're talking about on South 2nd It's just a regular old street in Highland Park, except it's not a regular old street. There are two entrances to Donaldson Park only. One is on South 2nd and one is on South 3rd. So I imagine that it's fair to say half of the people access Donaldson Park on South 3rd, and the other half access Donaldson Park on South 2nd. South 2nd is a trafficked street there with cars driving, and more than cars, lots and lots of people walk down South 2nd, past Valentine and into the park. And just as many walk down South 3rd. And that part of South 2nd has an open feel to it. I think that's what Wolfram was saying before. And I find, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I find those coops not to be attractive at all and inconsistent with the character of the neighborhood. So not only are they not promoting a desirable visual environment, I think they're a detriment to the visual environment. In addition, I heard conflicting testimony. I didn't hear any conflicting testimony about noise. We heard testimony that there's noise coming from the chickens that's impacting immediate neighbors. We did hear significant testimony that people who walk to the park with dogs, and that's lots of people, there's a dog park in that park, and that the people walking to the park with the dogs are excited and jumping around because of the chickens. I'm glad to hear that they don't smell. I've walked by those coops many, many, many times. I have never seen them other than in the place in which I saw them the very first time I saw them. They are not being moved around to my eye. I didn't stand there 24/7. I didn't go by 7 days a week, but every time I went by, they were in the exact same spot. And I went back a number of times because I wanted to see where they were getting moved around to. The chickens in the street, we have conflicting testimony as to whether or not there are chickens in the street. And to my eye, as somebody testified, I think Mr. Cohen, it's an eyesore. On the other hand, I think people should be able to conduct the hobbies of their choice. However, our right to have a hobby is limited by the impact on our neighbors. And I don't see anything wrong with keeping 3 or 4 chickens and having 4 eggs a day or 12. I don't know what the average chicken lays, but if it lays 1 egg a day, how many eggs can a family of 2 people eat without getting heart disease? I like the idea of the sustainability. Do I think Highland Park is a town that can have increasing sustainability? Yes. Do I think agriculture, including farm animals, is the way to go? Probably not. We don't live in a town with 1-acre lots and 2-acre lots. We're not in Hunterdon County. We're an urban suburb with small lots, and we live close to our neighbors. And quite frankly, based on the planning testimony from the only professional planner in the case, I feel like I have no alternative but to say that this is not this is not properly granted a C variance. No, there may be other people who want to respond with ideas. Well, I did think, but maybe there are other people who want to make comments. Okay. Tanya, would you call the roll?
Mr. Fector?
No.
Mr. Pheasant?
No.
Mr. Hofer?
Nope.
Ms. Corbin?
Before I vote, I just want to say that we heard a lot of commentary on, the merits of raising chickens and sustainability, and where it's very meritorious, that's not what we're voting on right now. It's just a land use decision. And having heard all the testimony, I don't feel that either the negative or the positive criteria were met, so I need to vote no.